Indrani Nayar-Gall, born in India and then migrated to many places, Barbados, US, different parts of US. But I'm a visual artist. That's how I started, with a more focused, I shouldn't say focused, because I did, all different kinds of art from the time I migrated after my, art school. But right now my practice is very much multidisciplinary, kind of almost a little bit of interdisciplinary, because I'm kind of incorporating words and so on in my work. So that's where I am. Recently have started some into filmmaking as well. So it's a bit spread over. And well, my formal education was in art school. So I did my BFA and my MFA, both happened to be in India. I kind of wanted to go back to connect with my roots many years after BFA. So I think that was very good. I was in Barbados for a while at that time, and I just got the opportunity to connect back, with my roots, where my artistic practice, my ideas, my thoughts, emerged and started.
Yeah. Were you always involved with the arts growing up, or was this something where you discovered it a little bit later, maybe your teen years, or was it something where it's like some people just know the art is in me and I gotta let it out?
That was the last thing you said, that was in me. But unfortunately, I grew up in a family where science is where the important stuff. Art could be a hobby, but nobody could imagine that art could be anything more than that. So my mom was a medical practitioner. All my uncles, aunts, they were all into it, sciences and medicine and all of that. But my mom and dad both had some artistic skill, but of course that was never their main focus. But I grew up the earliest day I remember that I filled up all around my paper, whatever writing, with little sketches and drawings. But I knew that this was not going to be anything main, so it was not even in the horizon. But when I, kind of became an adult, I started taking little art classes and so on. In high school, in the middle school, high school, you had art classes and all that, and they were the most fascinating thing in my life. But then later on, I think after I finished school, I did my first degree, which was in science. I just told everybody, okay, I have done enough of what you all said. I have to go to art school now. And that was the beginning.
Yeah. How did some of those skills that you learned when studying the sciences apply when you went to go study the arts?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think it helped me. I think, knowing about the sciences, I had my mind very clear and open, I will say. And in art school, I became very fascinated in printmaking. And I believe that happened because of my nostalgia and my fascination with chemistry lab and physics lab and all of that, because I love those things. Yeah. So I think they did have a very positive influence, in terms of keeping my mind open and wanting to discover and learn about new things. And that's the primary thing about art, isn't it? Discovery. So I think that really has something to do.
Yeah. And as your art has evolved, it has captured a lot of themes that involve history and social sciences and many current events. Did that start to form while you were in school through any classes, through your arts program, or was that something that grew as you became maybe more conscious in your practice as an adult and as a graduate?
Interestingly, I think I was born in a family where people were very much into, social justice, politics, and so on. My mom though she was a medical practitioner, she has strong interest in the marginalized, in the women. And even in, with her busy practice, she will, medical practice, she had formed women's self-help groups. She was very much of a leader in her town, in her community, and formed this clubs where young women can come and learn and become, learn skills to become, independent in their life and all that. And my dad was into freedom movement. As a young person, he left home and joined the freedom struggle with Gandhiji and all that. So that kind of, I think, so I grew up around that. I saw these images and I saw how a mom, did all these things, and my uncle was also very much into politics. So all that kind of, I think, formed interest in me of getting to understand the society, the divisions and, the structure and all of that. I believe so. So I think that might have something to do with my interest in social justice issue, and the fact that I go to do, artivism, that's the word, apparently is not art activism. So stuff like that, I think, my looking at my family, especially my parents, had something to do with it. I think the seed was planted earlier.
Yeah. And moving to the Western Hemisphere, but moving to, you said Barbados? And then the States, how has maybe some of the advocacies that, you grew up with family members in the freedom movement and women's rights, has those social justice topics expanded as you've moved to such a different part of the world?
Yes, it did very much. To start with, my husband is actually not Indian, of Indian origin. He is an African Barbadian. And he came to study in India. I mean, I was never exposed to Caribbean culture other than cricket, which is a big thing in Barbados and Caribbean. There was not much exposure I had, so I didn't know much about it. I knew about India and the caste and class and this sort of discriminating social structure, discrimination against women, and all that exists very much in India. Going to Barbados, I saw that, in a different way. But interestingly, it was different. I mean, Caribbean is very different from the US. US, you have, in terms of race structure and the power structure, you have African Americans being marginalized and the minorities and other colors being marginalized, but you still have that kind of supremacist kind of structure. But the Caribbean, after the freedom and all that, because the majority of the population were of African born or people from other countries, you didn't have that power structure. So you had in the political scene, you had predominantly African origin people, of Caribbean people, they dominated the scene. They were highly educated because of free education, and all that was initiative from in the freedom that happened in those places. But the wealth still existed in the hand of old plantocracy classes, So you had this kind of different peculiar power struggle. After coming to the US, it was a totally different story. I mean, you saw about the marginalized issues. You saw the struggle of the color and African Americans, and you can still going to happen. We just lost a huge advantage for African Americans to move forward, And of course, we lost our the women's reproductive rights also. So all these things, I think, probably has pushed me more towards those directions. I did not always talk about the issues I talk about now, but I think moving to the US, I think it happened more in my work and in my in my mind and all that I need to look at this issue. I felt like, okay, being a woman, what is my right? And I felt kind of similar kind of struggles and things that are happening in India with the women and here right now, what's going on. So yes, my journey is my moving from different parts of the world that definitely has helped those ideas to mature and crystallize.
Yes. And as your practice has grown and matured, as you have, I was wondering, different reactions to your art in different places that you've exhibited, and those types of conversations that you have. Because I feel like, I mean, of course, there's people who agree and disagree all over the world, but I just feel like it's really unique, the geography and the places that this art goes and the way that it's responded to, because I feel like in Chicago, in certain topics are maybe easier to talk about, more exhibition opportunities than even where you live now in Charlotte, right?
Charlotte, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, but fortunately, I mean, definitely, I will say North Carolina. I was going to. I mean, if I was going there, I mean, in other smaller parts of North Carolina, it would have been difficult. But yeah, I do have that experience of going to outside of Charlotte. But Charlotte, fortunately, is very diverse. It has some segregation, but not in a terrible way, in a sort of not necessarily too much of hierarchy, but people just tend to, kind of stay in their pockets. It's kind of perhaps like that, but it is more, but it is one of the most liberal cities or towns, it is in between large city and a big town. Okay, I might become very unpopular in Charlotte for that comment. But it's a growing place. It's a city, but it is more liberal, and I think conversations here are more open than probably other parts of North Carolina. So it is not that terrible in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was in Michigan before, and I'm in a small town. It is more university town, and well, fortunately, within university, there always this sort of safe liberal zone, but then outside of that, you're out in the world. So there is that kind of dynamics and pole, you can say.
Yes. So moving a little bit more to the present day, you were awarded the Two Women Show through your excellent showing at the Feminist Biennial last year in 2022. Just wondering, how did that feel when you found out? I just want to know.
That was such an excitement. I mean, I had the secret wish for the longest time. I got to know about Woman Made Gallery. I discovered it when I was in Michigan, and Chicago was just 2.5 hours away. And I found out with a few of the faculty, because I did teach part-time a little bit there, when I was there, I did part-time at the university. Some of them actually did exhibit at Woman Made Gallery, and that's how I got to know. And I, of course, checked out on web, and it was like an amazing place. I felt, what Woman Made Gallery, does, for women and, marginalized, non-binary and trans and queer artists. So that to me was probably the safest place you can think of to talk freely about these issues. So it was just like a dream come true. And I'm working predominantly on gender issues right now, gender and race, but you can only work on so many things at a time. So right now, my priority is on gender and, misogyny. And, but I do talk about race and class and, structure and discrimination, all those in some of the other pieces.
Yeah. So now at this point, you've been awarded the Two Women Show. You're working with someone significantly younger than you. What was that type of collaboration like with Madelyn, someone from different part of the country, different art style? I mean, I feel like the show blends very well, but what was that first conversation like with Madelyn planning the show?
We met at that show at the Feminist Biennial, and interestingly, her work and my work were just juxtaposed, almost like my work was on this wall and her work was on this wall. Wow. So that was kind of interesting. We were literally like back to back or side by side, kind of like that. And of course, I turned the corner, I saw her painting, the big, large, beautiful red painting. Of course, I love red. That's what I'm using in my work forever now. So, and my work was very much read too. So that was quite exciting. Of course, I knew nothing that this will happen, so we spoke at the thing, just like I spoke with other people, I spoke with her too, but not that much. But when we got the award, I remember her work. I said, "Wow, that'll be interesting." I think I think of the work that I saw in the show, I think those two, mine and her work, really goes together in that sense, So I can't imagine if, let's say, I was paired with another artist. I don't see anybody sort of work, could live in a place as best as ours did. So I think I felt very excited, and she has a lot of large paintings, a lot of passion, similar to what I have in my work. So it was an excellent fit, I would say. Yeah. Though our age difference is a lot. She has young artists doing her, completing her master's now, and so on, graduate degree. But it was really wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I felt like the pieces really worked. And the show was it had a lot of pink in it. So to have like those two very red pieces stand out, I think that was like, maybe probably went into the juror's mind a little bit when choosing, like, these would just work so well together. So yeah. I think that definitely played a part. Okay, so now you've talked to Madelyn, you know who Madelyn is, you've started working together. Now it's time for you to go into whatever pieces that you have or whatever pieces that you're working on. So with this being a two-person show, did you have a point where you had to narrow down pieces, or was it more of, okay, these are the things that I want to show, and I know this is it, and this is okay, or was it any ideas that were maybe bigger that you had to downsize? So what was that thought process like going into choosing those pieces?
This is more or less what you said toward the end. They were the pieces I knew from, of course, when I got the award, I kind of knew from then, because these were the pieces I was working on. These are the very latest pieces that I completed, and I haven't had chance to really exhibit them anywhere. The video literally finished maybe a week ago. full finished, that kind of way. I was still kind of fine-tuning and all that. The other two pieces were finished a bit while ago, but I haven't had an opportunity to really exhibit them anywhere. I'm also working, I finished that large documentary a while ago. Not while ago, it was released in 2022, finished in 2021, but films have a life after happens. It was released in festivals and all of that, so that kind of had it busy too. Then I got a fellowship that gave me the opportunity to learn more about filmmaking, so that helped me to learn. And then I was excited about doing the video, so I was more caught up in the making work than really trying to exhibit. I did small ones. So let's say a small part of that red bodies was exhibited in a gallery. The pouring red, the tap with the pipe that's red coming down, that has been exhibited. In fact, this is its second trip to Chicago. Pouring reds. Wow. So that was while I have exhibited that, but not these three large pieces. That's the red bodies, and the red on the floor, the pushing forward from the opening, and the all Red Riding Hoods do not come out of the forest safe and whole. That was those two were really not exhibited. They were too large, and you had to find really a show exhibition where it will really fit. So this was the right fit. This is where it all happened.
Yeah. And talking about, the individual pieces that you are exhibiting, as a dancer, I'm obsessed with the video because I'm just like, movement, bodies, this is what I live for. And I was just wondering what made you start using dancers for this piece? Have you used dancers before, and incorporating movement into your practice? What does that look like?
No, this is actually the very first. I mean, this is almost the very first video where I did nearly everything. I mean, I made film, but I work with a crew, and I will, I'll be acting as a director, and I will be, as a producer. When you have no money, you become your own producer as well when you're beginning. But the editing was always done. I didn't know much about editing, so that's why I wanted to know, because, because I was fascinated. I'm fascinated with film, and I wanted to make also. So in this one, most of those videos were shot, and I shot them. Only the dance, I felt that I need a professional videographer to really shoot that. So that's why I used. But from the beginning, the soundscape. So I put together these words. You can call it poem, whatever you want. So, because I can't claim myself as a poet, because that'll be really a terrible thing to do. But I'm finding interesting to play with the words. That's why the words are getting into my work also. And it happened with the film, actually. When I was doing the films, I had to write my script and all of that, and incorporate word, do the voiceover. So that probably got me started. And so when I was creating Red Bodies, I came up with these words, and I have the music composer that works with me for the film. He's just wonderful. He's very abstract, conceptual, like what I do in my work. So I asked him if he will create a soundscape for it, put the audio for it. So I kind of did the narration or recited the poem, and then he asked him how I wanted it, if he can create a sound composition of sound that can create the atmosphere of the storm and brewing and kind of roundish thing. So that happened before I actually got into making the film. When I finished the Red Bodies, that happened, and I thought of it initially as a soundscape only. I wanted to use it as a soundscape in an empty room with these two boxes where you will have the full studio effect and all of that. But then later on, the thought of making a film emerged after that, the experimental video. So then I started shooting little by little, experimenting and all of that. So a lot of the earlier shots, actually, I rejected them, and the newer things I did. But while I was doing all of that, I just kept saying, I'm working with the red and white, this color. Red is all about women. Everything, menstruation, the fertility, and all of that. And especially in our country, red and white are very interestingly associated with women. In the West, you see, with Christianity, you see white as purity, virgin, and all that. In India, in my culture, white is a symbol of a widow. She has lost all her color, because the red is the symbol of fertility. When a woman becomes an adult and she gets married, that's when she starts wearing red. You might have seen, if you see any, Indian woman or South Asian from Hindu background, you will see that they put red in their parting and maybe a red dot and stuff like that. So, and in my particular, I come from Bengal. I mean, I grew up in Bengal also. My father was from South, but I claim myself Bengali because that's where I grew up. I know the language and all that. So they wear this red. So a red and a white bangle are actually put on their arm when they get married together. So white has this purity as well as the other part, but the red is actually the symbol of fertility. So red and white, and the white came from coming to the West, seeing that how women have to be a virgin. And that's kind of norm. The bride wears white. A Christian bride wears white. I believe the Muslims also wear, but especially a Christian bride, a woman, when she's getting married, she must wear white. Can you imagine a woman wearing red at her wedding? and how is the red seen? It's like opposite. She's seen as a fallen, degraded woman in the Western culture, but in the in Eastern, in the South Asian and Indian culture, a bride has to wear red because she is coming as this fertile object. So, I mean, what you look at it, we're objectified. We are seen as a creature that can breed and produce and, and make children. And a lot of these things are actually associated with the religion. And in my red bodies, that's what you will say. I think I lost track of your question. Well, coming back to the dancers. Yes, that question was dancer. So when I was doing that, I kept saying this dancer's body moving with this sound, with this kind of circular kind of movement, like a hurricane and all that, like a tornado and all of that. And I kept seeing this red tug of war and tussle with this women's body, wrapping them and unwrapping them with this red and white. So that's how the thought of using or incorporating dance or dancers, especially women's body, in the soundscape came, in the video came.
Yeah.
And I got perfect people to do it. I mean, Audrey, who was actually, her team did that with the cloth. When we started talking, I asked her, what is the thing in your mind? And she said exactly what I've been dreaming about. She talked about red and white cloth. I was kind of amazing experience. I mean, it felt like we've been thinking the same thing. So that's how that happened. I feel very happy to integrate, to incorporate all those elements together.
Yes, I really loved what you said about the cultural context of red, because I noticed that, because side note, I like to watch Indian brides and they do makeup and I love their makeup videos, but I also look at what they wear. And I always wondered why they wore red, because I'm from here and I grew up in a Christian household, and I was like, wow, this red is so beautiful, so lively, so full of color. And I was like, on this special day, the way someone is so vibrant. Mm-hmm. And then I feel like the opposite. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with white, but I think the way it's juxtaposed, like one is a widow, one is going into her new life. And then on the opposite, like red is like a scorned woman, mm-hmm. in a lot of Christian sense, and then white is purity. So it's like those things, it's like not even black and white, it's that red and white is almost, for women, are like dividing lines. So I think, mm-hmm. working within those colors, you really feel it like off the bat, and then people can throw in their own cultural context, and someone from the States can be like, I was envisioning red and white coming from a completely different background. So I think that's really, really powerful, the use of color in your pieces. Yeah. So the piece that I always go to when I open up the gallery and I think I'm just like, I want to see this piece again, I really like the pouring red, right? I like the almost faucet and water-like strands. I like the individual strands, and I like that they kind of pull out a little bit at the bottom, right? But it does have an end. It does have an end. It doesn't just continuously flow away. It doesn't take up the whole space, but it's still flowing. And in your artist statement, it says that it explores a direct and forceful fluid. And I just want to know, like, when you're thinking of the way the fluid is flowing, some other things that you were trying to hit on, other themes that you were trying to hit on within that pouring red piece.
All of that is about surviving. For the past over a decade now, I kind of coming out of working with this, I've been working with a horrible, heinous tradition that is illegal in India, but still goes on, which is basically temple prostitution or religious prostitution. This existed in many countries many, many years ago. It still exists in Africa, and it still exists in India. But in India, it is the worst. The way these women are treated, and so on. It is illegal. It has been illegal for probably 40 years. but it still goes on. That is how amazing, I mean, this thing is, it's just like almost it will never go away. So it is illegal, it is underground, nobody knows what's happening. The NGOs who work on don't even want to speak with you, talk with you, because they're concerned that these women will be harassed and so on. So it was a difficult journey, but when I, actually, how it happened that I was actually looking into talking about gender. So years ago, this is like 2009, I got an invitation of a residency to go to India for a month, and it was in my town, my city, Kolkata, where I grew up, born and grew up. And I was really thrilled, but I was away. I mean, I have gone and visited many times, but not really connected with my roots and people in the same way I did when I lived there. So that I felt that I'm so out of touch, and I want to really know it, kind of familiarize myself in what is happening, because I came back seeing a lot of this gender discrimination, how patriarchy still kind of commands everything, how a woman, when she was a bride, she suffers, yet when she becomes the mother-in-law, she becomes part of the same patriarchal culture, because she's constantly being brainwashed from birth to growing up to becoming a mother-in-law. And a lot of that, there was a lot of dowry-related crime and so on. So I wanted to kind of refamiliarize myself to see what progress has happened. And then I suddenly just discovered this, and I was horrified. So I said, wow, this would be the lens I will use to examine misogyny, to examine patriarchy and toxic masculinity. So that's how we started. So when these women's stories are so, so sad. I met a lot of these, victims, a lot of the survivors, from young to old. I met those who are, everybody's, once they become, it's called Devidasi, means servant of the goddess, god or servant of the goddess. So once you are more or less thrown into it, you become almost like an outcast. So the day you're initiated in it or thrown into it, it is known that you can never marry or have a relationship. That comes through marriage, have your own family. So you are basically signed up into prostitution, religious prostitution, in the name of religion. But the religion plays a strong role into all of this. So don't let me forget where I was coming from. So, okay, what we were talking about now, the question? The pouring, surviving, right, the pouring red. So when I met them, their stories were sad, what they're still going through. They have children. In fact, when they get all these men seeing them, there is no safe sex. So they get pregnant, and they have to carry that pregnancy. So in my film, in the first film, I talked about they are told that they are the perpetrators, they're the people who exploited them are their lovers. They have to still accept them as the lover. They have to look after them, all of that. So can you imagine? It's like what women are facing in the US, that their bodies are controlled, that even though you are raped, you may be 11-year-old, but you cannot get an abortion. You have to carry that pregnancy, even if it threatens your life.
Yeah.
Okay. So it is, I feel like this is like reliving the situation. It is like open, it's not even legal now in the US that you cannot have an abortion. So similar kind of thing, these women, but these women, they had no choice. They are, first of all, they're lowest of all caste. Okay. When you're lowest of all caste in India, you have very few rights anyhow. People are not supposed, they're called untouchables. You're not supposed to touch them. Even touching their shadow, their footsteps will spoil your life, will define. Yeah, so seeing these women, they were at the bottom of the society. They have lost everything. One, they were underprivileged. They were almost there. That untouchable class is almost treated like animals. They have no privilege in most of the time. And on top of these women are even below that. They can't even marry. They cannot have a proper family. They are supposed to keep satisfying men. No matter whether they're drunk, whether they're diseased, whatnot, they apparently, according to religion, they're not supposed to refuse any anyone, any man. So, but when I saw them, they're so strong, so determined that no matter what happened, they are the mothers, especially who have young children, they're determined to educate their children, especially the girls, and they're determined that their daughters will not suffer this consequences that they suffer this fate that they suffered. So that, I think, was the source of my inspiration for doing that thing. And I have seen similar things after coming to the US. The women's organization is so vocal, you know, they're so vibrant, they're so strong, there are so many of them. And we look at all around us, there's so many survivors, you know, who have formed a group with women like her, and speaking out against, you know, atrocities, against patriarchy, against what is happening. Even now with this struck down of Roe versus Wade, you can see how much is still happening, so much, you know, I mean, they're gathering momentum. So all of those, I think, was at the, you know, behind in the center of my doing that piece. I was creating a piece for a show, and it was a fiber show. And I work with fiber a lot, you might have noticed. And I was thinking, okay, what I'm going to make. It was in between. I had started Red Bodies at a residency, you know, a small, tiny, the big piece, it did not happen. I was making small ones. And it came, I said, as the first thing you think of fiber, first thing you think of craft. And craft is important in my work. I want to make sure the work looks good, I think. But you always think of manipulating the material. So I was brainstorming, okay, what material I'm going to use, what I think. And then I said, the material itself is the power, you know. And I said, it's the yarn. Think of when you open it, it's like water, it's like fluid, it's like blood, it's like a waterfall. That is what is about pouring out. And I just wanted to call it. And the name just came, not just happened one day. I said, it is pouring red. So it was all. And it comes from a white pipe. You would have noticed it.
Yes.
Yeah. So all that was very much metaphoric and everything to me.
Yeah.
Like how women, you know, especially in the West, white is seen as the virginity and all of that. And yet all these things are done to them. They're brutalized. Their bodies are, you know, suffers this brutality, you know, and violence. And yet we flow, we move.
Yes, because especially when you were speaking about it, it made me think of, especially when you pointed out the white faucet, just growing up, seeing my peers growing up into purity culture. And then we get with our girlfriends, and then we express so much anger. And that's how I felt. That's when I saw Pouring Red. I was like, wow, you have all these themes. And you can interpret it so many ways. You can have the actual racial connotation of whiteness, the purity culture. There's so many other things that you can attribute to it. But it's like, you know, that opposite is that anger, that feeling. It is literally pouring out of people. You see that cry for help. You see that organizing. You see that people want to tell their stories. And when you were talking about the women in these temples and the work that they're essentially forced to do, and their lack of really respect and autonomy and rights, it brought me to your Red Bodies 2 piece with the hanger iconography and how it references Roe v. Wade. And you talked about those similarities of struggle when you were talking. But I thought it was interesting, even as you primarily, well, I'm not going to say primarily, but as you deal with fiber, the way that the pieces, what the fiber is coming out of, or what the fiber is hanging on, becomes a part of the piece. And I think that's just something interesting that I'm seeing from the piece we were talking about before, Pouring Red, and then Red Bodies, how what it's hanging or what it's coming out of adds even more context or even more interpretation to the piece itself. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, that was very much, I mean, I did that recently. I actually bought a pack of 100 hangers or something like that to do a large installation. And that's been sitting down. I've been doing little things with it, but when it came to doing this piece, I said, this is what it will be, you know, has to be this piece on this black hanger.
Yeah. Speaking of Black and bringing it back to the piece that has gotten us this two women show, Beyond Square, and those blackened, like darkened edges, right? And I feel like when you see a almost like burnt edge, you think of like what's burning it up, what has been scorned, and I just think that I was actually wondering how those Black edges were created, because you go through you look through the medium and it's like burning tool, but I'm actually interested in how did you actually burn those edges?
The soldering, it's not soldering iron, yeah, but it is like the soldering iron, and I think it's a wood burning tool. Yeah, that's what it is. So I actually wanted to burn it, but it was difficult to do it using actually a match or candle, so on. But I wanted the control as well, because I wanted those edges. Because my work, in a way, it is about that vigor, the strength, and that that force I'm talking about. But beauty is also important, I think, in my work. Maybe it has something to do with the ornate kind of decoration. India is known for, and it's very ornate, and East is known for that, especially India and for the South. So the beauty is important. So I wanted to maintain this wave that can feel like droplets of fluid also, So I wanted to maintain the edge. So I feel that I wanted a tool that can give me more control. So, I that's part of my work. I work with different material, different technique. I kind of experiment. So I experiment with tools as well. So I had to figure out what tool I can use. So then I said, okay, wood burning tool. So, going through things so that's what I used, but I did emphasize them a little bit more with graphite as well, to shading, to make them even stronger, that shading of it. But it was the wood burning because I wanted to literally create burn marks on those bodies. Yeah, that was important. Yeah.
And in the artist statement, it talks about growing up, as a girl in the patriarchal world of India. I was wondering if, like, I don't know the best word for it, but like the patterns, did they hold any like cultural significance? Because when I see them, it feels it reminds me of stuff that I see out of Southeast Asian countries. So I'm just like, I was wondering if maybe some more context on those would be really interesting.
There are a lot of geometric things as well, but there are a lot of those very ornate. India, in a sense, influence is not the right word, but you can say the many cultural penetration took place, because India is a country which was never India before British Raj came. Okay, before they're the one who brought it. Before that was the Islamic period. They kind of conquered a lot of these states. So basically, India was different states, independent states, all side by side in that area. So, and it has been invaded many, many, many times by many, many, many races from time immemorial. You can say before Common Era, BCE, around just that juncture, it was, there is the myth that was conquered by, the Aryans came, I say usually Aryan, not Aryan. Aryans came, and there was the divide between Dravidian and Aryan. The Dravidians were the indigenous population before. So all of that is there. So each time a different race, different ethnic group came. They came in India, they conquered, but became part of India. So India has people of many, many types of cultural people that literally look different. So we have Indians that literally will look Chinese or Japanese or, like Asian that way, not South Asian. So I look more South Asian, and then you have Dravidian, we're all mixture of things then. And you have actually in the far South, in the island, you have people who look just like Africans, including Afro. And we have our hair texture and all that, very, all this. So we have all kind of, color. And so there's a mixture of race. So I feel that when all this mixture happened, all those cultural elements kind of came together and somehow got fused and became something different.
Yeah.
So that might be the thing. But within the, so you see that ornate thing more among the ethnic group who are different from indigenous people. Like the first people of how you have in the US,
Yes.
Native American, India has its first people too. But there, the decorations you see there, they are less ornate. So the ornamentation somehow came a little bit from the Islamic culture. More arabesque pattern, that's the typical of Islamic. So I feel it's a beautiful mixture and fusion where you cannot differentiate and see things differently anymore because it's been happening from ages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because you're telling me all these layers to this place and the way the piece is layered. I'm just like, I'm literally imagining it in my head. I'm seeing a lot of things right now. So that this cultural context actually makes me really excited. And it gives a whole new perspective because especially when I'm viewing art, it's hard because, I'm not a scholar of all world art. And I'm like, hey, I've seen this looks similar to something else, but then you sometimes as just a consumer of art, you don't have your finger on the pulse of that place's history to be able to articulate the way that, oh, this reminds me of this, or I've seen this before, or even know why it is the way it is.
Yeah,
That's very interesting.
Yeah, and I love layers in my work. If you see my, when I do work on paper or flat work, I tend to have layers. But you will see that in my film, in the experimental video.
Yeah.
There are, I still sometimes, like if I come into real challenge, technical challenge, I'll speak to my editor, from my film crew. Okay, solve this or look at this for me, if it is all good. So my videos has actually 9 layers of videos. Not every single place, but there are 9 layers of videos. So he will tell me, maybe because you have so many video layers, you're getting into trouble. So I have I think I saw maximum, I don't know what the maximum layer, but there were 10 coming up, but I haven't used the 10th one, but then 9 layers. I don't know what will happen in the next project. but I love layers and I do that constantly in my work. I love transparency and I'm building up layer. I don't know where it comes from, but what you said, the interesting way you looked at all these layers, that you're talking about the culture and all that. Maybe it has something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, and that's part of the beauty of art, because once it leaves the artist's hands, it's all up for someone else's interpretation. And we ascribe our own personal meanings to a piece. And I think as everyone tries to be more nuanced and add more context, I feel like the works, the way that we view artwork, we're also trying to view, at least me, that's the way I try and view it, and not just, okay, this is a piece on misogyny, but and leave it at that. It's always, it's more than that. It's bigger than that, and it turns into who the artist is. And that piece would not be made if it's not made from you, due to all of your diverse experiences that have culminated, just like the diverse history of India and the diverse history of the way we create art. Because I was when I went to your website, you talked about your influences, but you've used European techniques just to convey what you've learned in other places. And I think that that's interesting, as though you have artistry and things from your home culture that you're conveying, you're still using a European tool. And not that art is just the European tool, they've made art, obviously, but you've used more European forms to convey something. And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, what I said, that, as a person, I grew up in India, and I particularly grew up in Bengal as a child. and I grew up seeing the cultural things, and that I think has helped to decolonize my mind. Like you'll see a lot of my work I do is on the floor. Some of them, they're hanging, they're not in easel, they're not on kind of typical canvas, framed canvas. Like if I haven't painted for a long time in terms of using canvas, but if I do, I'm contemplating, because the film, that experimental film, has created so much imagery, it wants me to go back to that. But I don't think I will use a framed canvas, a square rectangle. I will use a canvas which is not framed, as a cloth. And I'm even contemplating using a cloth and not a canvas, and using this alternate tool that they can give you perhaps even more, and help you to open your mind more, and explore and experiment, that little experimental artist, that that hunger for creativity that you have inside as an artist. I mean, as a thinker, as a maker, everything, what you can say, no matter what you do. And that's why a lot of my work ends up being on the floor, or as if it's in a hanger, or coming out of things. So that is a part, and the thing you do take from other cultures. Just imagine where Picasso will be, where Matisse will be, what all these people will be if they did not see African art, oceanic art. They will be still painting in the Renaissance format. If the Impressionist artists did not see Asian art, where will they be? How much time do we have? How we are doing time-wise? Are we doing well time-wise?
Yes, I have no notification for timer or
Okay.
now.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that to me is the thing, that there is no shame in taking, because people have been taking from time, ancient time, you can call it as an exposure, you can call it as a creativity, I can call it being inquisitive. And the other thing is that I wanted to make a little comment on what you said, that when you finish your work and it goes somewhere, it is to the person who's looking at it. Exactly, that's what I believe in, that I feel that I have finished my piece and I've given it to the world. I cannot tell you how you should see it, because you can only see it from your experience, from your perspective, in what made you, and that's what you will see in it. Because you will, and yes, if you're curious, you will read artist statement, you will try to talk with the artist, but you're still going to see it from what has made you, what are the things that has created your thought process and your mind and your imagination. So that's it. I think artists will have to live with that.
Yes. You talked about decolonizing your art practice, and I think that is that language is becoming more common. I feel like in art spaces, and I was wondering, how would you? I mean, it's different for everyone, but how would you encourage other artists to be experimental and think differently and try and challenge conventions to really decolonize their practices for themselves?
I think that first of all, you have to be brave. You have to be really strong. It depends on what is your goal in your artistic life. And if this is primarily going to be your bread and butter, then you're going to be very safe. You're going to be very careful and scared to move away from the norm, to move away from the easel, But sometimes if you actually a little brave and you can jump in on that little parachute that you can take you to somewhere else, maybe you will become even something more. Maybe you will make work that will bring millions for you. But the thing is that you have to take that risk, and take the risk in the sense that if really you want to love yourself, love what you want to do. But I mean, if you're happy with painting flowers, there are a lot of beautiful things you can do painting flowers. Degas has painted dancers, but he moved away from the norm. They were all rejected from Salon and all that, from the shows. And look what happened after that. To me, the risk taking is important. That's the way that you feed, they're vitamins for your creativity. I think you have to be courageous. You have to be, I mean, right now for me, I need to make what I want to make. That thing that inside me tells me to make this, to talk about this, I have to say that. I cannot think about money, you know. I'm fine if I can get some meal, a day, and because I'm most of the time making art anyhow. I'm not going to the movies. I'm not going, I do like to travel, but not that's something I'm doing every day. What makes me happy is to think about, okay, what I'm going to make next, and what is it going to be, and how am I going to make it? That's to me, that gives me that inspiration to get up next morning, and start a day and carry on.
Yeah.
That's to me is the main source of inspiration to move on with life.
And you talked about being brave. This might be, I don't know, a little scary, but what is one thing that, makes you a little nervous, makes you a little scared right now that maybe you've been challenging yourself to think challenging yourself to think outside of the box, think outside of your bubble recently, or in a piece that you're thinking about or working on?
I think that's something I do constantly every day. My brains, I feel, will become vegetable if I don't do that. I feel I'll become vegetable. I just don't have any interest in getting up from a chair or doing something. So that to me drives me. I think drives my, as a person. Gives me that inspiration and takes me from point A to point B. All of that is important. Of course, with that, I mean, you have to keep your mind open. You have to keep reading. You have to keep seeing where the world is going. Not that you have to follow a trend, because what you are thinking may be totally different from what the trend is. And I definitely do not like to fall in trend, unless the trend is something is really driving me. I mean, what is happening in the trend right now, if that is what I feel like doing, I'm doing that, and I find that's also a trend, then it's fine. But not otherwise, because you still have to listen to yourself, who you are, what you are, and what you want to do, and what is really important in life for you. And that to me will give you that, integrity, and give you that not just passion, but that going through that in an honest way. I don't know if you understand what I mean. Like what I'm doing, whatever is coming out, I'm being honest about it. And unless, I think there's a difference between being fake and honest a little bit, and somehow I feel it comes out. If you're being fake, if you're just doing it looks kind of decorative and not really. And you can make a piece that is decorative, but when it is made with that, that inner integrity and passion and thing, it comes out different. Even if it's, so whatever stroke or the sewing needle, whatever that is you're using, or a stone or clay, it comes out differently when you have that, when you're talking from inside yourself.
Yeah. Well, that was I feel like that was just an amazing way to wrap it up. I feel like you just, moral of the story, be true to yourself, take risks, and decolonize your art practice. I feel like
Yes.
top 3 things to learn from Indrani today. No, that was amazing. That was amazing. I really enjoyed speaking to you today. Is there any last thoughts that you want to throw out there that we didn't speak about, that you're like, this will not be complete if I do not get a chance to talk about it?
Well, first thing, before I say anything, I said I enjoyed talking with you thoroughly. I mean, it was such a lively discussion. Thank you so much for making these questions so interesting and dynamic. And oh my God, that was really deep. That was wonderful.
Yes, it's because you are a really fascinating person. I'm like, I want to know more about you. That's why I feel like every time I get to interview woman-made artists, or people who are exhibiting at Woman Made, I feel like we attract some of the most interesting people. And especially.
Because interesting and powerful people go to exhibit and at Women Made Gallery, right? One last thing, if I say so, all my work, in all of this work, I'm talking about misogyny, but talking more about patriarchy and toxic masculinity. We see such a robust exhibition of it in today's society. I mean, we lost affirmative action. I mean, I can't even believe that. We lost reproductive rights. I can't even believe that that has really, all of these things have happened and happening. And maybe the next is, as we hear, could be the gay rights, and gay and lesbian rights. So we don't know what the world, I mean, I just feel that I'm seeing Handmaid's Tale right in front of me. It is not an illusion. It is not in the film. It is happening right here. But going forward, there are some feminists see that, okay, we get rid of men, but we cannot get rid of men. This world will never change if we don't think of bringing these two together. We have this toxic masculinity. We are this strong and thing, there's no heart. And when we have these women who think that men are all bad, how men becomes bad? And that's what we have to think. How do we socialize our children that become this sort of big divide? So I think that as women, Woman Made Gallery, we need to have a movement. We need to probably have more conversation about that, where we go from here so that we can bridge this gap. We can make this society a whole society where we, both male and female, will think about each other's benefit in each other's well-being, and will not have this draconian laws imposed on women. And prison cannot help. Prison will make more prison, only love can help. And that starts at home, at family, in a very small way, in a little way.